है रोशनी का कारवां.
This podcast is brought to you by Score Foundation.
ये है रोशनी, रोशनी, रोशनी का कारवां, रोशनी. Eyeway, ये है रोशनी का कारवां.
Hi, my name is George Abraham and welcome to Eyeway Conversations. My guest today is Yamuna Jivana Dasa. He currently lives in Vrindavan in Mathura and grew up and spent a significant amount of his life in South Africa. And he is a spiritual teacher. So welcome, Yamuna.
George, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be on the program today.
So let's begin with South Africa. How did you end up in South Africa? What's the story there?
Well, I was born in South Africa, but my parents were or are of Indian origin, and therefore so am I. So in the 1800s, it happened that the British took people from India, promised them opportunities in South Africa when the gold rush happened, and only to find that they were captured as slaves when they arrived. And obviously there was no easy access to return because everything happened by ship and so on.
There's a very large Indian population in Durban. Are you from Durban or somewhere else?
I'm from Johannesburg, but formerly my parents were or my great grandparents settled in Johannesburg. It's very unclear as to how that happened, when it happened, but eventually Johannesburg became the economic hub of the country. So in order to get work, in order to start businesses, it was most conducive. So they moved to Johannesburg.
Yamuna, you also have an eye condition. And is this something that was genetic or something that you had when you were born, or you picked it up somewhere along the way?
My mother mentioned that during the incubation, I was premature birth by about 4 months premature, something crazy like that. Or 3 months, no, rather 3 months premature. And they didn't cover my eyes, and that damaged the optic nerve. They were supposed to have covered the eyes, apparently. So they suspect that would have damaged the optic nerve. So I'm bioptic atrophied, and therefore totally blind in both eyes from as long as birth, or as long as I can remember.
So I'm curious to know, Yamuna, you grew up in a different country, that's South Africa. So how did your parents respond? How did the community around you respond? And what was your initial years as a blind child in Johannesburg?
It started off quite interestingly. My father explains that, at least while he was with us, he's now late, that at some point, at about 2 or 3 months old, they were playing with me, and they realized that when they were moving brightly colored objects in front of me, I wasn't responding. And when they would shake a rattle, that's the only time I would dive for it, or move my hands for it, or whatever the case, show an interest. And gradually they realized there was something wrong with my eyes that way. But when they discovered I was totally blind, yes, it was a shock. It was a very devastating blow because they've never had interaction with blind people before this. So my mother, in total abandonment of a solution, because she tried everything, she didn't know what to do. They tried so many things to so-called have me recover my eyesight, which I never had. But then she, in total abandonment, she said, I surrender. I'm giving this up to God. You take care of him. And that's when she did whatever she could just to facilitate me being blind, did everything in their powers, my mother, my father, and the rest of the family. I had a very, very supportive family, very encouraging family, and they allowed me to pursue whatever I showed an interest in. The first of which was music, and they bought me a little piano at a very young age. And that kind of sparked off my, I guess you could say, my main career path as a child. So, and then when I went to school, they facilitated, arranged for me to go to a boarding school for the blind. And yeah, they were very supportive all through my journey. So I never felt inferiority complexes or any unusual symptoms of being blind much until much older in my life when I left school. But that's a whole nother story.
If you know of anyone with vision impairment who needs guidance on living life with blindness, please share the Eyeway National Toll-Free Helpline number 18005320 The number is 18005320
So, Yamuna, 95, you finished with your school, and obviously, when you went into university, you would have had to make choices. So, did you have choices, or you were compelled to take certain streams of education?
Well, I had choices, but the one thing that I wanted to was not one of the choices, and that was music. I always wanted to study music, braille music, theory, piano professionally. I never got the opportunity because in our school, there was no facility to teach blind students music, even though it was a school for the blind. They were not properly equipped. And so, even though there was a music teacher, he never really facilitated us, and he never encouraged us to pursue music as a subject. But I wanted to get into law at one point. But being, at that point, I started showing an interest in spirituality as well. And I came to the understanding that in the law, there's a need to lie a lot. And I just never felt comfortable to do that. You have to defend people that may not be very innocent. So I worked towards teaching. So I started my postgraduate diploma in education after getting my Bachelor of Arts in with English and history as majors at the University of South Africa. At that time, we used to scan books, and instead of having them electronically available, we would scan them. The software was called Open Book at the time. It was a very old version, what was it, 1.9 or something like that, with Arkenstone scanner from the company that sold these things as a package with JAWS. It was Window Eyes at the time.
Yamuna, after your post-graduation and all that, how did you launch yourself into a career? Because we in India, finding a job is a challenge. So what was your journey like over there, and what did you actually start off?
Okay, so in 2002, I was doing my postgraduate certification in education. And during that year, there was this thing came up called Pop Idols, which became, I think you would probably know about it here in India as well, with Simon Cowell and others. So it was a competition of national talent, and they were trying to find, a winner, or at least within the finalists and so on, would get recording contracts with larger studios, Universal Sound of Music, etc. So I decided to enter the competition because a family member told us about it. And after that, I was awarded a contract with the Universal Sound of Music, and I released my first single through that, which reached number 2 on national radio, on some of the main stations on national radio, especially in KZN in Durban. So that was the beginning to my music career. But then very quickly I learned that I want to be an independent artist, because these larger companies exploit you. They don't give you much opportunity on your own to develop, and you just become a puppet in their hands. So I decided, no, I'm abandoning this career path, and I'm going off on my own in my own music studio. So with the help of my family, I established Gora Records Audio, which is my own music and publishing company. And that's where it began, really. And I started releasing music singles, and I used online platforms like CD Baby, Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube Music, and so on. CD Baby actually handles that for us. So I had my releases, singles and albums on about 96 different platforms during those years. I worked for a company called Tiscali, which is an internet service provider. they just did an interview with me, and they asked some relevant questions, and they saw that I knew what I was talking about. I have a good memory for, the interface. So they would ask me questions like, how do you access the settings of your email client, Microsoft Office Outlook? And I would tell them how to get there, and they'd say, oh, this guy, okay, he knows his stuff. Let's take him. And that's how I got in. So it wasn't because of qualifications. Sometimes it's really about what you know and how you can present yourself. And then I worked there till 2005, until the company closed, actually. I also took on a job at the bank, at the back office of a bank. And again, they were looking at that point just for a switchboard operator. And they had installed JAWS on their computers because they had a mandate from the government that you had to have so many people that had disabilities. And when I went in, I did an interview. They liked what they heard from me, and I was taken. So I worked at the bank between 2008 and 2018 for the next 10 years, starting as a switchboard operator, getting into back office work, getting business for the bank clients. Offering leads for different products, bank products, getting feedback from clients. So there was a lot that I did during that period. But it was my music was still the main thing in my life at that point, and spirituality became far more important to me over the years as I progressed in that journey. So my music also took on a different direction. I started writing spiritual songs with meaning, messages. So that's how my career happened. When I left the bank in 2018, I then applied for a post that was at another company called African Eye Institute. So there I was teaching sound engineering, computer literacy, smartphone accessibility. And so I did that for about 2 years. And then I got into another company, a bigger company offered me an opportunity there called Blind SA. So I left African Eye Institute. I moved to Blind SA, and there I became a training officer, which means that I was responsible now for other trainers that taught around the country. But while I was at Blind SA, I wrote a book, Computer Literacy and Accessibility, in Braille, and I had it published in South Africa. So that was a book that was published in Braille. I even have the BRF files. But I also made them agree that the book rights would belong to me, so that I can avail it to people without the company taking that for themselves. So now I can make it available for blind people free of charge.
To support our work with the blind and visually impaired, you can visit the donate page on our website www.scorefoundation.org.in. Please note www.scorefoundation.org.in.
From being very young, I was always hoping to find love. I was a romantic by heart, and that's just who I was. But somehow the right person never came along, and my taste in a partner changed as my interests adjusted in my life. So I became very much spiritually involved, and the questions about life and its meaning, and God, and how to navigate closer to a relationship with the God, all of that became my preoccupation over the years. So it was around 2006, I came to Vrindavan, here where I am now, for the first time. And I prayed. There was a special place where it says that if you pray here and you offer God your sincere prayer with your desires in mind, those desires will come true. It's a place called Kamyavana. Kam means desire in Sanskrit, and Vana means forest. The forest where one's kam, desire, is fulfilled. And in that place, there's a place where it's mentioned that God manifests plates in the rocks so that they could have lunch when he was on earth. God as Krishna, as we know him in my tradition. So in those rocks, there's plates, and we were allowed. I was actually very fortunate to be allowed to do the offerings of food to God in that area. And while doing that offering, I prayed that I will be able to meet someone, and when I do, we will come back. And I don't know why I said we will do 108 offerings of different food preparations. And lo and behold, when I went back to Johannesburg, it wasn't even a year later. 2 years later, 2008. I met actually 1 year later, because in 2007 I met my wife online. So there was a devotee matrimonial website for spiritual seekers. It was called connecthearts.com. It's no longer active now, but it allowed people to choose their partners based on spiritual interests and all kinds of variables you could select, and you'd be matched with somebody that matched those variables. The kind of interest, the kind of lifestyle you would like to live, the age group, the demographics, all kinds of things. So I matched, I put up my profile. And even before I could meet my wife, somebody that, the person that actually ran this group, he contacted me and he says, I see your profile and I know somebody that tends to match you quite well. Do you mind if I introduced you? And she's from another part of the world, though. She's from South America and you're in South Africa. So what do you think? And I said, hey, why not? Just, let's try. So he put me in touch with her, and she was from a very, very conservative home. Her mother wouldn't allow her to give her my phone number, her phone number, so that I could phone her. But we communicated by email at the beginning, and we got on right very well from the outset. And we shared spiritual interests, and we found that we both had the same desire to come back to India, because she was also from Indian heritage, it turns out. And in Guyana, they were also taken to be exploited on the sugarcane plantations. They had their family history. So it was quite interesting that we both had the same family challenges that our ancestors faced. And yet here we are from different parts of the world coming together with the same background and the same desire to come back to India, to our motherland. And so we did that. We met, and on the 3rd of June 2008, I booked the plane ticket for my wife to come to Johannesburg from Guyana, which is where she's from. And that's when she arrived. And 5 days later, she lived in during that period, that 5 days until the 8th of June, she lived in my mother's home, and I lived in my own outbuilding until the marriage. And so we were married there, and that's how it all began. I've got 2 sons from her, and it's now, one is 14 and one is 15 years old.
So, Yamuna, your stay in India is now probably 2 or 3 years. So what has been your stay in India like? What do you do? And how does your life here look like?
So I've come here to retire, basically, from active, economic life. There comes a point in one's life, at least it did for me, which I'm very fortunate that I could at least think the way I do. It's very difficult to think this way, and I think I'm gifted by God to think this way, that enough is enough. Most people cannot reach that point, but I did. And even though I have growing children, they're going to school, I have enough money invested. Significant. It's not like large amounts of money that I could say enough is enough, but we manage hand to mouth. And, we have enough to pay all the bills at the end of the month. And the things that I do now is, I'm still passionate about the blind community and doing something for the welfare of the blind. So my focus is at the moment spiritual education. I believe that we are blind in 2 ways. So we could choose to become sighted in one. And the 2 ways are material and spiritual. Spiritually, if we're blind, means we don't have a sense of direction of what comes in the afterlife, where we want to be, how we want to develop a future towards that afterlife. And that's true across the board, in spiritual circles. It doesn't matter where you're coming from. So, I feel that it's one thing to be blind physically. We are blind physically. That's okay. But if you're blind spiritually, then that's the only real problem. So I feel that it's my place to, because I've been receiving a very significant training in my spiritual life, and I've had very good guidance. So I want to educate people on the platform of spirituality, answer all their questions. There's a lot of questions people have. How do you know there's a God? Why is there so much of suffering in the world? Who's responsible for this creation? Why is it made up of so much of pain? These are questions that deserve answers, and we have those answers. So I want to make those answers available to people through the wisdom of spirituality. And that's what I do. That's what I now do. I focus on. So another area of interest that I have, which I want to pursue later, is to get involved in the printing of literature, spiritual literature in Braille, and also availing it in electronic format and other media and mechanisms that blind people use, whether it's Braille displays, whether it's through the medium of Braille, or whether it's through smartphone access, whatever formats that people are comfortable with on those platforms. So that's another point of focus. I've teamed up with another good friend that I met here in India, and his name is Ishwarapuri Das. So him and I want to get involved with the community that he has. He's working with a blind community where they print spiritual literature in Braille, and we want to kind of bring a community of spiritualists, people interested in spiritual life, together here in India. So we started a group as well. Every Sundays we meet at midday. And it's not only India. I see we're getting people from back in South Africa that I knew that were totally blind. In fact, all of the members of our group are totally blind. They're not even partially sighted. They use either Braille or screen reading to access their devices. And we take turns reading, explaining. Questions are put forward. We try to answer them. So it's quite successful. Slowly but surely, I expect that we will progress from strength to strength with this, and even get people from different parts of the world. So we have one group in English that I run, and my friend runs one in Telugu, and we're hoping to find others to do a session in Hindi as well. So this group is based on the Vedic texts and Vedic literature. But we welcome all people from all walks of spirituality, because I'm a firm believer that if your goal is to love God and to develop a relationship with Him, God is universal. You can call Him by many names, but He's one God. So we try to encourage people to see it that way and to learn from each other's traditions. So yeah, this is really my focus. And the other side of it is I also try to focus on my own spiritual growth. So there's practices that I perform to enhance my own spiritual journey, to strengthen my relationship with God. So it's teaching, and it's also self-improvement. It's ultimately what I will do till the day I leave this world. That's my plan. I have my plan. God has His plans.
Wonderful, wonderful. It is, I think, on this is a great note to end our conversation. Thank you very much, Yamuna, for taking the time and speaking to me.
Thank you, George.
Eyeway, ये है रोशनी का कारवां.
This podcast was brought to you by Score Foundation.
ये है रोशनी, रोशनी, रोशनी का कारवां. रोशनी. Eyeway, ये है रोशनी का कारवां.